Hey friends, Connor here in Pittsburgh. Welcome to the stream. Welcome. Good afternoon. Got these little Guardians, journal, sketchbook. No, fresh page. We're listening to Vaporwave apparently. I was a little unsure about this, right? But there's like a Vaporwave channel on the Free Music Archive. A lot of free music that's historical really doesn't get kind of copy struck by, greedy people who are trying to make a little buck off of claiming to have a license that they don't. If it's really old stuff, like not even the kind of like copy striking, like current companies sort of remember it. But Vaporwave, I feel like, is probably sampling from stuff that the algorithms know or have heard before. So I worry that the audio for this will just disappear, but such is not having to use my own computer to host all of these giant video files or, any of that kind of shenanigans. Other people's computers, other people's platforms. Always good to write the date on any work that you're doing. I used to have a lot of different excuses and reasons and thought processes for the perks of writing the date on things. Different. If it was in an office setting, it's good for covering your butt to have everything dated. If all kinds of different scenarios where it's good to keep a record and to have that record have dates and times attached to it. But fundamentally, I'm just going to go with a super broad statement, which is that if you are creating value, which by being creative on a page you inherently are, the next piece of data that will make that value something usable to someone in the future is the day that it was created, and maybe the place it was made. Just for the purposes of archiving, organizing, filing, handling these pages over time, putting the date on them at least gives them one axis of organization, of sense to them, of sense making. If you encountered these pages at random, you could at least order them by date and maybe see a chronology, a progression. But yeah, good habit. A good habit for a lot of reasons. So here we are warming up. This is a continuation of checking out, essentially reviewing my vacation photos, as this one more explicitly titles it, this live stream. And what are we doing here? Well, I went to California last month. I went there to visit my parents, to be on vacation, to sort of rest and relax, but also to do some artistic adventuring. There were a couple of events. This was all before the virus really became like a large concern in people's minds and started arriving on our shores. Late February, early March. I was deeply inspired by that trip. I saw all kinds of things that I had not seen, and I learned all kinds of new facts, and I visited new places, and I saw architecture that I'd seen before and architecture that I hadn't seen before. Uh, just a thorough uh, well, yeah, it was like an artistic residency. It was like I was there in order to find the inspiration to make new work, and now we're going back through, and I'm just making sure that at least for every photograph that I personally kind of went back in and starred and said this was a cool photo, this was at least a beautiful photograph, if not an interesting subject. It was a well-composed shot. Um, and in doing that, now I have these kind of inspiratory views that I know are inherently inspiring because they're beautiful photos of things from a different environment than the one I'm in right now. And so I decided the one thing I really wanted to make sure to do in April before before this trip was too far distant in my mind was go back and really thoroughly look through all of these photos uh, and draw from them, just because I didn't really have the wherewithal or frankly the interest to kind of do this long drawing process while I was out there. I wanted to spend my time out there getting these photos, and I wanted to do this process afterwards, but not too far afterwards. So here we are. Here we are in April. Some part of my brain says, "Oh God, April 24th. That's real late into April, buddy." But that part of my brain is always saying, hurrying things like that, and I had some pretty ambitious plans for this April. Kind of quarantine plans. I decided on a number of fronts that I wanted to make the most of this time in ways that I can make the most of it. And I am doing this in April. I'm already, like 3 or 4 hours in. This is a second stream that we worked on this, and I already have put in time offline. Yeah, I'm good. I feel very fine about this, and whatever part of my brain is, complaining is just a spoil sport, and no need to converse with spoil sports. F the haters, man. This is such a classic Beaux-Arts photo. Such a classic. It's a photo of such classic Beaux-Arts architecture. Beaux-Arts is characterized. It means the beautiful arts, right? And it's characterized as basically a modernist remix of classical Greek and also Renaissance architecture and architectural details in this really kind of overwhelming layer upon layer of these details, not really according to any kind of historical sense, but just like poured on there. So you have this coffered ceiling which has diamonds and not squares, right? It could have had ribs, but instead it has crazy diamond ribs, almost cathedral-like. You have the doorway itself. You have these kind of like plain Roman columns with the coffers on either side. And those go out. You got bars on the windows because it's an educational institution. Oh no, those actually might be tiny, tiny little banisters, basically. Oh, they might be bars. Oh, it looks like they're banisters on this side and bars on that side. Well, whatever. Yeah, the point is, oh, and then you have the floor down here. The brickwork is all super decorative brickwork, but it's not. It just goes from one kind of brickwork to the next kind of brickwork to the next kind of brickwork. It's just overwhelming how much beautiful art has been kind of smashed in together. How many different historical designs have been worked into this new meta design. Oh yeah, we didn't even get to the lamp there. But yeah, so moving on. Right. Same building, maybe next building over, a big performance hall, and this is kind of an indoor-outdoor stairway that takes you up to the balcony, directly from the street, so that the balcony has its own street entrance so that they can fill the hall more quickly. And I thought that this was a very elegant kind of design solution to get essentially a breezeway. Without making this wall seem disrupted, but also without well, it's just really elegant, right? You don't quite notice that the arches are mismatched in length, and the columns, the beautiful, beautiful column work just draws your eye away from the kind of lopsided nature of these, as it's intended to. That's what makes them good design. And from this hypothetical distance that we're at here, we're not going to be able to see the little fleur-de-lis that characterize this. I am trying to put in the cross-patterning, the diamond shapes on these. And so this is actually just in the larger structure. Oh, this music has some disquieting, slightly upsetting electronic noises, it seems, that characterize it. All well and good. Oh, it's evil laughter. It's like machine noise combined with evil laughter. Here I'm kind of freestyling this upper roof line. And we can't see the roofing material from the ground, but it being California, I'm going to take the unbrave stance that it's probably roofing tiles. So we can just start drawing those. There's an experimental noise artist called Merzbow, a Japanese noise artist, who I think a lot of death metal fans are fans of Merzbow, because when you get really deep into death metal, there's a point where you actually get pretty abstract and esoteric about it, and so you kind of fall into this arrhythmic noise space where just all you really have is the, as my friend Andrew calls it, the scouring of the senses. Though he doesn't apply it to, he didn't apply that appellation to death metal. He was speaking of his own, some work that he was working on of his own. It was in his most recent podcast. Oh, and that might have been... Oh, no, we got a new one. Yeah, I wasn't quite expecting... Well, I mean, I guess I was expecting Vaporwave, but... or experimental Vaporwave. Did I think it would be different? No. Was I hoping it would be better? Yes. For sure. Yeah. Alright, this will make more sense. Because this angle is so severe. And let's go ahead and really zoom in on these fleur-de-lis. It's funny, it can be so hard to try to draw fields of diamonds like this. But one thing to always keep in mind when you're drawing diamonds, I'll try to align it for you guys here, is that if they're right angle diamonds, then they're diamonds is squares, guys. Diamonds is squares. And so you can draw them to a square grid and keep the diagonal, well, what was up and down and is now diagonal, to its diagonal. And get a little bit more regularity by doing it this way. And you're still freehanding, which is an interesting process. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. How cool is this? That we get to show these cool rolls as these square parts come around wrap around the edge of the column here. There's a little bit of continuation that we get to show, which is really fun. And there were some beautiful entrance doors here, double doors, so I'm only going to draw one side. And this roof continues, but we don't need to draw that. So this is those arts. Breeze away. An external, but enclosed staircase. Right, what's interesting is that there's steps that go up here to the second floor door that's back here. And then fleur de lis. I'm going to call them cobbler columns. Cobbler because to me this looks like someone went back in and laid down a bunch of stripes of pie dough across the top and created kind of this lattice. Right, that's what it's called. A lattice of diamond shapes. A lattice of diamonds. Sure. I'm just gonna leave the rest of this column as a... Well, okay, no, I'm not gonna leave it as an exercise to the reader. I'm gonna go ahead and finish it out. Why not connect all this stuff up? That's one way to kind of make sure that well, it's an interesting way to fill a sketchbook, to make sure that the sketches kind of intersect with each other. They don't have to. Sometimes I have sketchbook pages where none of the sketches touch, but we're doing vacation photos, and there's something a little dreamlike about this, so having them all kind of smush is actually kind of fine. I also like the sense of scale that's happening where there's this real play between big column and this little one, and this door entrance would have been that big, but yeah, it's good. So, I think we're on to our next photo. There is nothing of value in this car. Please, do not break the window again. This seemed like a Zen koan when I read it. It hit me like that. You know, like, is there anything of value in this car? No, man, no. We gotta value our human lives. I think this was an Uber vehicle, or a Lyft vehicle. Hmm. Ooh, will I be able to write window again? When you're trying to write narrowly in this font and do it with precision, one thing you can do is do all the verticals first and then go back in and do the horizontals so that they fit. So I'll do it with again here. A G A I N. Oh God, right, I almost confused myself there, right? You see what I almost did? But I did it. Please do not break the window again. The periods, right? Like, that it's no longer an exclamation, that it's just, like, please do not, again. Oh, where are we? We are right near Packbell Park, and this is some amazing, strange fractal shrubbery, which we're going to take a crack at drawing. See if we can't puzzle out how this stuff grows. Make a kind of system for drawing it. I'm going to throw us up on break for just maybe 5 minutes or so. Drink a little bit of coffee. It's always good to stretch. We got some kind of techno beats going. Interesting. Hmm. So, what is happening here, you might ask? What is happening to how these leaves come out and to how this plant is structured? Well, this plant has developed a system, and the way that that system works is that kind of each piece of the plant knows how to start to grow the next piece of the plant, and there's some determinism about that. There's also some randomness about it, but there's a fair amount of determinism about it. There are some kind of plants that are what are called determinate, and there are other plants that are called indeterminate. That is about growth and how much or how big a plant will get, and if it will kind of get to a certain size and then stop, or if it's a particular variety of that plant that's indeterminate and will just grow to an unknown size. It may be as big as it wants, maybe, who can know? It might be plant by plant, but there's no certainty about a maximum height. What I'm speaking about is more generally determination and indetermination in terms of just the where structures come in as the plant grows is a process that the plant is engaging in and during its growth, right? Like there are genes that are specifying kind of how many ticks to go before you lay down another leaf, and then how many more ticks to go before you lay down another leaf, and so there is a fractal relationship between, in almost all plants, there's a real fractal relationship. If they grow naturally and on their own, you'll see kind of a fractal relationship to how their growth is. The bigger plants, or that there's sort of wide leaves at the bottom, and then narrower new leaves in the middle, and then these super fresh leaf parts at the blossom end, which is kind of the growth end. And this is not true for every plant, but in this particular case, right, you can also see that sometimes these main stems will just suddenly split into a couple different stems. Here, this one splits and goes sideways and becomes 3 or 4 different stems. This one here splits and becomes 1, 2, 3, 4 different stems. And that the base of the tree itself has that same characteristic, right? In fact, you can see this kind of swooping that's happening. So if we were going to draw the plant from the highest branch to the lowest branch, it would essentially be this blossom here, this tower of leaves here that kind of dies off after a bit. That goes down to a branch, which is pretty big. And maybe there's another 1, 2, 3. And that branch, you see, has gone down into even another branch. And now it has, let's say, 4 small branches coming off, and then each one of those. That branch goes into another branch. Oh gosh. And then finally, down to a root, right? Well, the picture cuts off, so we may never know, but there's at least 1 coming off there. And there were 2 here. 3, geez. And on this alone, right, this stem has 4 substems, which have 4 leaf stems, leaf branches. So that's 16 leaf branches, 20 sub-branches, 1 regular branch, and then a big branch will have 4 of those regular branches, and just on and on, you know, like you can see that this this tree starts as one trunk and then just keeps splitting, forever and ever and ever, all the way up to the part where uh, the blossoms come out. You can also see lower down, down here, that there are a couple of cases where, for example, we were up here on this side, going down, 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 and we got down to this branch. Well, this one right here just kind of skips having more sub-branches, and it goes right to leaf branches early. So this tree actually has branches of differing depths, in addition to having branches, in addition to having a ton of different branching structures. It also is not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes deep, right? This one's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nodes deep before you get to the blossom. In computer science, this is actually just called a tree structure, and you talk about it that way. Usually, when you're talking about a tree in computer science, you draw it inverted, so it's like a root structure. And my understanding is that the reason that you draw a tree like this is just a conceptual flip that in computer science, when you think of a program, when you think of the program executing one line at a time, going down the page of code, one line of code at a time going down the page, it does so in this sort of falling pattern. And so I think when people talk about the notion of, well, we'll take the left branch and we'll fall all the way down to the lowest node and then work our way from, node 1, node 2, node 3, node 4, node 5, node 6, node 7, node 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. When you do it like this, it's not a tree, it's a root, it falls. But yeah, so in computer science, this idea of this kind of graph is called a tree, right? This is a node, this is an edge, this is another node, or a vertex, or a point, or a line. And so a graph is a collection of nodes and lines that, touch each other and interact. And so this is kind of a diagrammatic expression of how you might think of such a tree. But the trees that we're drawing, right, like this has 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, and as we talked about up here, this has 6 layers, except where it only has 5, and sometimes it might even have 4, right? You can see down in the corner right here, there are little sections of it that are growing that are just, this one right here is just at a 3, right? It's coming off main stem, right? Yeah. It looks like it has like a very little set of kind of, it tried to have a number 3 here, and then it went up to 4, and actually, yeah, that was it. Its 4 is its, that's where its flowers are. So if we were to design a system for how this goes, how we would draw these, And there's not always 4 nodules. Sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's just 1 or 2. But looking at this in general, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it seems like 4 or 5. But what you could do, is you could say we're going to design the conceptual diagram of this tree, and then we're going to draw a tree based on this system. So if we had a tree, the base has 4 nodes, this one has 4 nodes, this one has 4 nodes, that's 4 nodes. You can see how this bush grows to have the stalks all be so close to each other, right? It really tries to fill this outer space with as many nodes as possible. Yeah, it's hard to even draw this many nodes. We're already way in the weeds. And this is an exponential thing, right? This is that there's 1, 2, 4, 8. If every parent node has a child node, has 2 child nodes, then every generation is going to double in size, right? And so in this case, if every trunk has child trunks, that is to say branches, and every trunk has 4 or 5 child trunks, this thing's just going to split and split and split, and split and split and split, which is just insane. It's a lot of splitting. And so almost the way that we can define how to draw this is actually to think about the top layer of this plant, the layer that actually does face the sunshine, and to try to draw as best you can from kind of a consistent pool of starting points down here, how each of these different final stems would try to approach the light. And know that most of these stems are all going to be coming from the same couple places. In fact, you can actually start to say, well, these are connected, so let me just connect up these 4, right? And here we are. And I'm not drawing every single piece of these lines, but I am trying to say these guys all come together. And maybe that's 1, 2, 3, and then this is part of 1, 2. This is a subnode. That's a subnode. I'm going to assume that that last one kind of did its own subnode thing. Now we have the start of kind of a convincing version of this bush, but all that we've really done, this is actually just, and I'll do this in purple so that you can see, right, is that we laid down the top nodes. We started to think about groups of 4, and then from each of these we made middle nodes, the next layer down, and then started to define how those middle nodes connect and made sure that these rules stay consistent across this entire, consistent or mostly consistent across the entire plant. And so now, when we go in and even add these very abstract versions of what these leaves look like, right, I'm just making kind of a kite shape. We're doing a similar trick to what we did with the ferns. And we're developing a system, establishing some rules, and then trying to compose with that system, but with a little bit more elegance than if a computer algorithm was performing this task. This task we are performing, and we, as creative human artists, have some real intuitive powers about where to drop lines in, what to show, what not to show, how to kind of trick the eye, the human eye, even a little bit more than what a computer algorithm trying to re-render these would do. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm kind of suggesting in the places where we don't see leaf detail that there are more roots that come down to this central guy. And now what I'm doing is I'm adding kind of almost an impressionistic idea that within this mass, some of these are a different color, some of these stems just catch the light in one kind of way or another, and that going back in and really detailing them can add kind of a depth to what's happening. Right, and then interestingly, there's a real shadow element in the lower part of the bush. Is very much just a tangle, you know, and a shadowy tangle at that. Yeah, so that's a little bit about thinking in terms of trees and mathematical models, and relating math and nature to each other is something that mathematicians have been doing for a long time, and the biologists have been doing for a long time. And bringing it into the art world, I think, is an interesting idea, right? That these systems are essentially their own kind of paintbrush, but they're paintbrushes that are kind of chained together and slightly deterministic because they follow these kind of fractal rules, and if you draw the hook this way, then it hooks that way throughout, you know. Maybe it curves in a spiral like that, or out into a parabola, or a hypocycloid, or wherever it goes, you know, out into geometric space. So this one doesn't have a flowering part, nor does this one down here, or this one. These ones do, though. Perhaps these got pollinated already. Perhaps these low down ones just don't bear blossoms for whatever reason. And this one seems like an interesting version of this, right? That it's very short, but it does have this blossom at the top. And these ones seem like they grew very fast. You can also see that these do have periods of fast growth and slow growth based on leaf density right here, how quickly these leaves are attaching themselves. That's variable across the whole plant, it looks like. And you can see that the bark seems to break in the same places that those former leaf scars were. These leaf scars, in fact, relate pretty directly to both this and that. And I will show you what I mean. So what those leaf scars are actually forming is a rosette. If you looked at this plant and a lot of different plants from the top, what you see is that there will be a bit of a pattern to how the leaves grow. Sometimes they grow 5-pointed, sometimes they grow 4-pointed, sometimes they grow 30-pointed. And sometimes they grow as a rosette. And what a rosette usually is when you have a great density of leaves that are all coming in at once, and they're all about the same length, and then you look down on them, and they're all packed together, and they have this quality. Well, what's happening here is that, so we'll start with this leaf, and then you move like 140 degrees around the main axis of the plant, and you get to this leaf, and then you move 140 degrees, and you get to this leaf, and then you move 140 degrees. Well, now you're not at 360 degrees, you're at 420 degrees, right? You've gone beyond by nearly 90 degrees. You're over here. And then your next one, you're over here. And then your next one, you're over here. And pretty soon, you've just developed this whole kind of like growing pattern based on moving around the circle there. Well, a plant's not a circle. A plant is a helix because in addition to this element of rotation, there's also this element of growth. And so when you see these leaves, what you're seeing is you're seeing this spiral pattern draped, almost like draping. Oh wow, I'm like down out of the frame. It is draped almost like draping a Christmas tree. It is draped with flowers, with petals. These petals go off backwards. Here, here. So you get this rosette that is actually kind of this larger helix that's just been flattened down. And as you're looking at how this plant is growing, it looks like it and it grows two at a time, almost 90 degrees apart. So it's going, if you were looking down the stem, you'd see a scar here, and one on the far side, a scar here, one on the far side, a scar here, one on the far side. And you can actually see in some of these stems that you can just make out the helix that loops all the way down where these leaf scars are. And in the case where the helix is tight, you end up with sections of bark that look like they're really chewed up. Well, they're not. It's just that there's a tight coil on how these leaves have grown. You can see here in this one, as it goes down, you can actually see the diagonals of this diamond pattern as it falls down the column. And what makes rosettes instead of this, which wouldn't be a rosette, this would just be like almost a cylinder. I mean, it is a cylinder. What makes these rosettes is that the further down the plant you go, the bigger the leaves are, and so the rosettes have this growth curve to them that matches the spiral curve growth in a nice mathematical way. I think that we've dissected these plants pretty well, and having this kind of tree diagram of that they go 6 layers deep, that they split into 4s or 5, split at nodes into 4 or 5 child branches. And then maybe the top 2 sort of sunlight touching nodes develop the blossoms, and they stay green. 2 layers deep. Right, and in that case, when one of these guys first grows, well, what do? You got base node, trunk, you make a node, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you got little blossoms at the top of each one of these because they're sunlight touching nodes. They stay green, this stays green. The next step, these guys develop sunlight touching blossoms, and then you check to see if this stays green. Well, this 3rd layer stays green, the 2nd layer stays green, and then this 1st layer becomes woody growth. It hardens up, and so then as the tree grows, it slowly becomes more tree-like and stiffens up over time as the canopy spreads out. And this is how almost all trees grow. I mean, this is usually how plants grow, right? Is their goal is to start in the ground and to produce an incredible number of sunlight-touching nodes, because each of these sunlight-touching nodes provides like a fixed amount of sugar to the larger tree, because it's a question of area control. It's a question of sky control, of light control. And if you can be the tallest, if you can outshade everybody else, you get all the sunlight, and It's glorious. Well, I think this has been a pretty great stream for the afternoon. We've learned a couple different things. We went from kind of final Beaux-Arts styles to floral inspiration that maps back onto those styles, and I think that's my jam, guys. That's what I'm all about. This has been a really great writing stream, or drawing stream. And I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to go for a nice walk. And I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm streaming again tomorrow at 1 p.m. I will be on here until 2:15 or so tomorrow, and then I have to go pick up a cow. A little piece of a cow. A share. So that's exciting. Have fun, everybody, and I will see you all later.